What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show, the two-time Canadian Ethnic Media Association award-winning Dr. Vibe Show. Received just recently the 2020 award for Internet News, and in 2018, I received the Innovation Award. As always, I'd like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. And also, once a month, I host conversations for fathers and dads that are co-sponsored by Dad Central and Dove Men Care. And as always, I'd like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. You know, if you watch anything about me, I like new friends. So tonight, we're blessed. We have an OG and a new friend. So let's talk about the new friend first. Shana Almeida is a professor of politics and race at Ryerson University in Toronto. And believe it or not, I'm located in Toronto. I knew nothing about this lady, nothing. And now I'm humbled to know more about her, and she's going to be dropping knowledge bombs tonight. Before that, she spent over 6 years as a political staff in the municipal government of Toronto with first with former City Councillor Olivia Chow, amazing lady, and then chief of staff to City Councillor Gord Perks. During her time there, she spearheaded several citywide policy initiatives in the areas of anti-racism, equity, immigration, employment, recreation, public health, poverty, and housing. Her forthcoming book, Toronto the Good, with a question mark, Negotiating Race in the Diverse City, discusses what the City of Toronto does with race and racism to remake itself as a beacon of democracy, racial inclusion, and progress. So that's our first guest tonight. We've got another person, well, the man who brought her to the platform, to come on next. So our next person is, and some of you have been around a bit, you know who he is, but if you don't, LeRon Barton is a writer from Kansas City, Missouri, currently living in San Francisco, a graduate of the Paseo Academy of Fine Arts. He's the author of 2 books, Straight Dope, a degree look into American drug culture, and All We Really Need Is Love, stories in dating, relationships, heartbreak, and marriage. In addition to his books, LeRon is an essayist whose topics cover racism, mass incarceration, politics, gender, and dating. These works have appeared in Black Enterprise, Salon, Harvard Business Review, The Good Men Project, Your Tango, Media Diversity, Raconteur, Elephant Journal, East Bay Times, and MoAD. He is an international speaker who has given multiple talks and appeared on TEDx, Al Jazeera, University of San Francisco, Navis, Speakers Who Dare, Nas Dubai, Glide Memorial Church, the City of Cupertino, Los Altos Chamber of Commerce, Square, and Defy Ventures. I knew him before all that, folks, by the way. In his spare time, he enjoys mentoring African-American youth, teaching creative writing at the San Francisco County Jail, and backpacking around the world, which he's not doing a lot of right now. But let's welcome both our friends tonight. Shana, LeRon, how are you?
Okay.
Good. Good to have both of you on. It's excellent to have both of you on.
I'm really excited to be on the show today.
Good. So we're going to put you on the defensive first, LeRon. Shana asked me a question before you came on live. Do you remember the first time you were on the Dr. Vibe Show? Can you guess a year? A year. We're giving you a lot of leverage. A year.
It's probably like 2016, right? Like, you know, where I stepped on the scene. Like, it wasn't what
yes,
was it not 20? Okay, all right.
So 2015 is the first time you jumped on, because she asked me that. So we wanted to catch you. We got to get you going in a good way.
Wow.
I would like to say that both of you are on a topic tonight that it's never enough spoken about, but I feel that you're going to give some new depth and perspectives. White supremacy and the exception to the rule. Before we get to that, how did both of you meet? Because LeRon, you're on the left coast. Shana, you're in TO. How did you two meet?
Social media, I think, a few years ago. We have a mutual friend on social media. And then we realized that we kind of have the same politics and started to like each other's posts because we both say dope stuff, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then we talked about, well, I think you say more dope stuff than I do, to be honest. And then we just started talking about working together, doing something together. And we were originally going to write something, but then I mean, writing is horrible. So we were just like, okay, let's do a podcast and see what's up. And LeRon thought Dr. Vi would be the perfect place to do it.
Definitely. No, like, I heard of Shana through a mutual friend. I really liked what she had to say. I mean, Shana, she's so blunt and just so forward when it comes to talking about racism and white supremacy. And it's like, you know, for me, Dr. Vibe, I'm fairly similar. So it's like, you know, for those who have heard me on the show throughout the years know that, you know, I have no flex. So with that, I really liked what she had to say. The fact that a Black man from the United States, can work with a South Asian woman from Canada, and the fact that, you know, we talked about Black and Asian alliance. I mean, it really spoke to me, and I was like, well, let's try to contact Dr. Vibe, and it made sense. Y'all both being from Toronto, you know, Dr. Vibe being a very good friend of mine, and just, you know, I'm really excited about this conversation because I love what Shana posts. You know, her politics are right, and I love hearing strong, smart women speak about really important issues. So yeah, you know, so I mean, like, you know, here we are.
Wonderful. Why did you two want to come on and talk about this subject?
Well, you know, Shana and I, we were talking about writing something, and, you know, Shana she was already writing a book, and the piece that we were constructing felt fairly similar to what something that she was writing about. And so, plus, you know, with time restraints and just how, you know, hectic 2020's been, she had thought that, well, let's try to do a podcast first. And the topic, it spoke to me because, you know, if you look at as far as the 2020 presidential elections in the United States, there were more people of color that decided to vote for Donald Trump, you know, rather it be because they, you know, I can only speak as a Black man myself, but only like maybe because we felt that Biden's involvement with the crime bill was something that we cannot overlook. Maybe we liked what Trump was peddling, something, but like throughout the scale, you know, all the numbers increase around Black, Latino, Asian, and other people of color. And it's like, we were like, well, let's kind of explore that. And then, you know, we just kind of start talking about being a non-white person in various spaces, either academia, the workplace, et cetera, and how some of us kind of vie for this, I guess, rancid attention, if you will.
Shana?
Yeah, so I first started tackling this idea of being the exception in 2014, 2015. I've written about it in a few places, but I think in my book that's coming up is where I really focus and hone in on what I mean by being, the chapter of my book's called Being Exceptional. I think this is what's interesting, though, is LeRon and I have had conversations about this idea. I think LeRon calls it the rugged individual, and I call it the neoliberal individual. But we have and I don't know, and maybe this is what we're going to figure out in this conversation, is I think we have different approaches in terms of who the individual is and what they do and how they inevitably perpetuate white supremacy, right? But that's what the chapter of the book is about. It's about, and this isn't, so whenever I've had these conversations with folks, especially racialized and Indigenous folks, whenever I have these conversations with folks, they feel like I'm trying to blame. And I think the first conversation I had with LeRon, I think LeRon said that too, like it sounds like blame. And I'm really adamant that that's not what I'm trying to do. I think white supremacy is such a powerful force, and I think we need to locate ourselves in it no matter who we are, because I don't think any of us is in an innocent space outside of white supremacy. And I think that's the conversation that needs to be had, and that is being had in various spaces. But I think that's what LeRon and I sort of ended up with, this idea of how we participate and how we participate without thinking about the collective.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think for me, it's really important because I locate myself in that project first. In the book, I open with my own BS and how I did it and how I continue to do it. And then I interviewed city staff and I located how they did it and continue to do it too. And then LeRon's talking about the 2020 election. Biden, I mean, have they declared him won yet? I don't know.
So basically, like, what's going on now, Shana, is it's like the I guess the quote unquote transfer process is finally starting to happen. Like, I believe President-elect Biden will have his first briefing on Monday, but Donald Trump is still trying to challenge a lot of the results. I mean, I believe that Pennsylvania, the certification of Pennsylvania still stands, and so now Biden is still he can't challenge Michigan. I'm sorry, Trump can't challenge Michigan. He can't challenge Pennsylvania, so he's still trying to find this quote unquote smoking gun. But it's just, I think it's more than him being a sore loser. I just don't think that this is a man that's probably never been told no. So he,
Correct.
He can't help but to think like, well, like, wow, like I actually lost this when, unfortunately, like it shouldn't even been that close. It should have truthfully been a blowout, but white supremacy is a very seductive way of life. So
for both of you, and I guess we'll use the American election as an example, how embedded is white supremacy in our culture?
Shana, I would love to get your thoughts on this question.
So it's everywhere. It's all the way through everything. And I think the danger, though, for me and the way I frame it, what's almost as dangerous as white supremacy being everywhere is people who think they're outside of it and act like they're outside of it, right? And talk like they're outside of it. So this is this idea of this exceptional person. And when I talk about people, or I talk to people about how white supremacy is everywhere and it's included in all of us, folks get really resistant to that idea, especially in academia. I just want to preface by saying academia is a horrible place with horrible people. It really is a horrible place. Like, I thought politics.
And why do you say that?
Yeah, like I thought politics was bad for 7 years, but academia is a horrible place. It has good people for sure. I don't think I would be there if it was entirely horrible, but academics especially are the people, especially critical academics who do work around race. And I wrote this with a few of my colleagues last year in a piece we did together on white supremacy, where folks who do work on race or variations of race or white supremacy, whiteness, so on and so forth, they write like they're outside of it, right? They're the critical force that's outside of it and tackling it. You're in academia. You're in the last bastion of white supremacy, right? Like, academia is a white supremacist place. So when you're producing all this work and all of these articles and you're writing and you're publishing and you're sitting on committees, academia is a place that sits back and co-opts your work and says, we're not racist. We're not white supremacist because these people are here. But the danger for me in academia, and then I also talk about it in politics, is those people that think, and we all do this to a certain extent, that we're the most progressive, or that we're the most strategic, or that we're the most knowledgeable. And that's the danger, because that's when the sort of neoliberal individual becomes the sort of rock star, and then the collective is gone. And the way I'm thinking about it is like, when you're that individual who thinks you're a rock star and you think you're outside of white supremacy and you're not doing anything except for attacking white supremacy from the outside, it creates this idea that white supremacy has its limit, and the limits end with you. And
Right.
I think even in producing yourself as a rock star, you separate yourself from a collective. And I think that's a tool of white supremacy too, right? To make these individuals outside of the collective. LeRon can probably explain our conversation.
So first off, Shana, you pretty much articulated why I like have a side eye towards the white liberal, right? So basically, like the white liberal, he or she thinks that they are above white supremacy, that they are above being called a bigot, a racist, that they are above or detached from actually participating in a system that perpetuates injustice of non-white people. So I want to say thank you very much. You know, Dr. Vibe, when you asked the question, is white supremacy embedded in the society? Well, you know, you have to ask yourself, what would this society be without it, right? So we have so first off, white supremacy is definitely a sleight of the hand, right? So it lets people know, hey, or it promotes this sort of this meritocracy that doesn't exist. So it says, hey, you know, if you work hard enough, you can get ahead. People that don't work hard enough, they are where they are. People that get stopped by the police, well, you know, they had to be doing something wrong, or they'll say the quote unquote one bad apple. What it never does, what it never does is it never indicts systems. See, it's really easy to indict people, right? You know, when I was younger, I didn't have a full understanding of what it was. So when I would think about race, I would say, okay, well, you know, it's the police pulling me over for no reason, right? It's the KKK, it's skinheads. We don't understand that white supremacy is also the mass incarceration system that engulfs many Black people. We don't think about white supremacy as being a system that has essentially destroyed a generation of migrants coming from Central America. Many of these young kids will never see their parents. They don't know where they're from. So they've broken up families, similar to how the war on drugs did, which turned into the system of mass incarceration, which essentially disenfranchised a generation of people. When we live in a system like this, right? It's only natural for us to want to seek refuge, right? So, you know, there's a great it's like comparing Black people and other non-white people's relationship to white supremacy it's like comparing a battered spouse, right? So the battered spouse is going to do whatever he or she can do to avoid being hit, being assaulted. So we're going to buy into this exceptional rule. You know, it's one of those things where some of us, white supremacy will remove us from our group, right? They will take us away and they will say, hey, you know what? You're special. You made it. Those other people, no, you know what? I don't know about them, but you are exceptional. And being that we live in this system that prizes white features, that prizes white literature, you know, white art, that the model of success and what we should attain is a suburban lifestyle, you know, that essentially has a white face. Of course that's going to be seductive. You know, when Shana initially talked to me about the concept, you know, she's right. I did say, well, wow, you know, you're blaming us, but I had to take a step back, and I was like, well, that's the power, that's the seduction of white supremacy, and unfortunately, we all, like, none of us is immune to it. And so I think that when we sort of understand that then we can have a better understanding of it.
I want to go back to what Shana said about the white liberal. Why are they? I'm going to put it out there. Why are they not touched, or why are they given? And some people say white liberals are given a
carte
pass.
blanche. Carte blanche.
Why do you feel they're given a pass? Obviously, LeRon thinks so. I've had him on a few times, so I know a little bit of what he thinks. But I'd like to get on your end. Why do you feel they? And some people say get a pass.
So here's the interesting thing. In my work, I don't talk about the white liberal. You know the book Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race? Rennie Edo-Lodge, I think, is the author of it.
Yes, I do. Yeah.
So I actually don't talk about white people at all. My book and my work, because white liberals, we get it. We get why white liberals prop up white supremacy. My work and why it's so charged and difficult is because I'm talking about Black and Indigenous and people of color communities. Because I feel like, and this is what I see with my kid, this is what I see in the world, it's really easy to point the finger at other people and say it's your fault and it's your responsibility. That's not working so well for us, right? White supremacy is large and in charge, and it's here to stay. Like blaming and pointing the finger at other people, nobody's listening anymore. I think what I'm asking is for us to look at ourselves and see how we prop it up, because we do. And I'm not talking about how white people prop it up, because we've been having those conversations. Right. Like Juan started talking about, there is an increase in votership for folks who voted for Trump this time, Black, Latino, Asian. There's an increase, right? We can talk about how white women are responsible for electing Donald Trump until we're blue in the face. Mm-hmm. But there are people from Black, Latino, and Asian communities who are also seduced by this. And that's what I'm interested more in figuring out, because we have to figure out how we perpetuate white supremacy ourselves. So academia is a perfect place, a model of that, and so is politics. And I am too, right? Like, I was the only racialized chief of staff at the city for years. I thought I was like some anti-racist superhero. I went in and did all this stuff, and I was like, look at me, and da-da-da-da-da. And all the city did was co-opt it and flip it around and be like, we are the anti-racist beacon of the world, and we are diversity, look at us. And I was so caught up in thinking of myself in a particular way as this anti-racist champion that was fighting white supremacy, that I missed how white supremacy was gobbling me up and spitting me out as its own version. And I center myself in that as a way for us to see that for all of us who think that we're outside it, we're being produced to reproduce white supremacy in everything that we do. And I think it's really important that we look at ourselves first.
I 100% agree with that. I think that one of the things about looking at ourselves is that, you know, again, it's like what Shana said, you know, it's very easy for us to point the finger and say, well, you know, the white liberal, the white conservative, listen, like, so there's a quote from Malcolm X that he says, you know, when it comes to dealing with, you know, Black folks who say, you know, anti-Black things, you know, and I don't have to name them because there's so many. He said, you know, if you're walking by a man with a dog and the dog jumps at you, do you get mad at the dog or do you get mad at the dog owner? And Malcolm was like, you get mad at the dog owner. However, with that being said, we also have to take some responsibility in sort of realizing, like, how is this perpetuated in our communities, right? You know, how is anti-Black thought rewarded? Why is it that when Black people get into academia, when they get into political positions do their sort of I guess why are their thoughts, why are their lack of a better term, why what they want to do, it gets watered down, right? You know, it gets to be just some third-rate version of what they really wanted to do. Why do they go along and start to internalize and accept anti-Black thought? So I think that is something that we need to really discuss here, and it's not being discussed.
Okay. Shana, you're focusing on Black and Indigenous individuals. Why do you feel it's a hard conversation for them to have? For some of them to have?
So I'm focusing on Black and Indigenous and people of color, right? Like Bible. First of all, I just want to make one thing clear is I'm not interested in having this conversation because I feel like there's a possibility of this being co-opted to think this is why Black people shoot each other. That's not at all where I'm going. I do this work because I want to shine a light on the absolute pervasive power of white supremacy, that it has no untouchable place, right? So I'm not invested in having conversations with, yeah, these people are guilty too. It's not about guilt. It's not about blame. The point of us looking at ourselves is actually to see how white supremacy exists in this moment through us. It's actually to shine a light on the power of white supremacy. It's not to individualize blame or to show people as being weaker or more stupid or less progressive than others. And I make that very clear. I think white supremacy is so tricky and so sneaky and so conniving that it can find its way into everybody. And I think the more that we shine a light on that, the harder it's going to be for it to be everywhere. And it's going to be everywhere. Personally, I'm not optimistic enough to think that white supremacy is going to end anytime soon. But the work is about finding out its tricks and its sneaky attempts and how it gets manipulated and how in political moments it continues to insert itself no matter what, right? And I think the more that we investigate that through shining a light on ourselves, the better we get to know white supremacy and how sneaky it is. And the better we get to know white supremacy and how underhanded it is. That's what I want us to do. That's what I'm doing. Not a blame game. Because this is the thing, like we've heard so much about these stupid terms like Black on Black crime or, Indigenous people drinking alcohol. That's not at all what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a project that seeks to expose white supremacy as a project. That's the difference, right? So I want to make that clear.
Okay. LeRon.
No, I totally agree. Like so many of us, we get caught up in things such as, Black on Black crime, Indigenous folks, drinking too much, just these various negative tropes about us that have been passed on from generation to generation. And a lot of that leads to self blame or, if we treated each other better, then maybe white supremacy would not see us as a target. And we all know that's just not factual. I personally believe, and I agree with what Shana's saying. There's not one part of the world, one part of society, culture, one part of life that white supremacy has not touched. Listen, I'm a Black man in America, so everything that I do, Dr. Bob and Shana, I have to factor in how do I, contort myself in a system that does not want to see me breathe, that does not like me, that despises me, that just does not want to see me succeed. So it's everywhere. And with that being said, it would be totally like we would be totally remiss if we did not acknowledge like how it seduces non-white people. Because see, listen, white supremacy cannot live, it cannot operate in a system without people who are participating. Yes, the major beneficiaries of it are white people. However, there are Black people that understand that, you know, listen, this is a system that is crushing us. If I can do something to alleviate some of this pain, then I'll be all right. That's why, I mean, like, that's what Shana referenced earlier, rugged individualism. Look, when I was about 31, 32 years old, right, I looked at myself as an individual. I'm 42 now. I look at myself as a member of a collective. See, that's the difference. When we realize that it's a system and that it doesn't, like, individual achievement, you know what I mean? Like, individual wealth, whatever, it doesn't matter. Like, it's all about the collective. And one way for us to truly have the collective understand this is for us to point out why rugged individualism is such a bad thought. Why neoliberal individualism is a bad thought. Listen, we're not saying that, you know, Black people, indigenous folks, you know, Latinx folks, Asian people can be racist. We're not saying that. Please do not misconstrue these words. What we are saying is that within this power system, some of us choose to go along to get along, and they sort of forget that, you know what, I'm a part of a group. You know, they rather, you know, there's an old saying, they would rather go for self. And, you know, I understand it. I don't agree with it, but because people go for self, you know, we're not able to pull everyone else up. Like, we need to totally disavow this thought of, you know, I got mine, you're like, you know, you better get yours. No, like, how about everybody get theirs?
Better decision, good decisions. I got a question here from the audience. How does a world without white supremacy look like, or what does a world without white supremacy look like? Any response? Is it even visional? Can we envision a world without white supremacy?
I'll tell you. So here's my thinking. I think the idea of the collective and the idea of community is disintegrating because of white supremacy, and the idea of communal care. I recently watched Angela Davis in conversation with Adrienne Marie Brown about what community and care would look like. And I think community and care is the opposite of white supremacy. I think white supremacy is, like I said, so sneaky and so creative that it's destroying any sense of community and care and solidarity within movements and across movements because of this production of this neoliberal rugged individual who's better than everybody else and more progressive than everybody else and better at everything than anybody else. I think it's destroying the collective and the idea of community and the idea of care. So I think a beginning thought for me is a world without white supremacy would be a world in which there was solidarity and care and community and a sort of nobody left behind philosophy. Because white supremacy is also inherently connected with capitalism, right? And that's where the neoliberal rugged individual comes in too. It's like, I got to get my money at whatever expense. And I think a world without white supremacy, we'd have no wars. There'd be no 1%. I think community and care and solidarity would be at the center. And Black feminists have taught us that, right? And this is the conversation that Adrienne Adrienne Marie Brown and Angela Davis were having. And I think that's, in my view, what a world without white supremacy would start to look like.
LeRon.
I totally agree with Shana once again. You know, to have justice, for everyone to be able to live in a world that they're not terrorized because of what they look like, to be able, you know what, and you know, that's such a hard question to ask, right? Because can you so let me see, how can I put it this way? Imagine you are a person who is absolutely brilliant, right? You know, and you have so many ideas, so many thoughts, so you know, you have so many abilities. You are just an extremely talented person, but you don't have the avenues to apply your talent fully, because not only do you have to try to find ways to apply your talent, but you have to find the resources. You have to fight to get the respect, to be viewed. So you're using energy everywhere, right? That's what white supremacy is. So to live in a world without white supremacy, all right. Let's say that there's a movie called Paid in Full, right? I don't know if anyone saw it. It's based on a story of three guys from Harlem in the 1980s. Because so many black men, because so many Latino men, because of so many Asian, just people who are not white, they've been locked out of the quote unquote American project. They have to use their tools, use their brain power in ways that are not legal. The main character in the story is a guy by the name of Ace, and I remember reading Roger Ebert's review on it. He said Ace was smart enough to be a president of a Fortune 500 company, right? But because he's young and black and he's not born in the right circumstances and he doesn't have any opportunities, he has to go into the drug trade. So to have a world without white supremacy is to be in a place where everyone has the same opportunities. Shana said no one's left behind. There's no war. There's no people sleeping on the street. San Francisco, for all of its liberal glory, over 50% of the homeless are black men. In a world without white supremacy, it will be none of that. Like black and Latinx women would not be dying in childbirth higher than anyone else. You know, the prisons would not be filled with black men. It would be true. Like, and I hate to use this word because of its racial connotation, but it would be true fairness across the board. And you know, I don't think that we will ever see that. I mean, like, you know, I believe, you know, what the late great Derek Bell said. I believe in the permanence of racism. That doesn't mean that we stop fighting. It just means that in some form, you know, it will exist. Look, we know that we're gonna die someday, correct? That doesn't mean that, you know, we stop living. It's just still like at the end of the day, it's always going to be there. But you know, yeah, Shana, I agree. Like no one's left behind. You're like, you know, think about that. Like, you know, everyone has a chance. Like that's just, I mean, like, you know, that's incredible. Like, you know, it wouldn't matter if LeRon Barton was born in the ghetto. I would still have the same chance as some white kid in Toledo, Ohio, or in Atherton, California. We could still have the same opportunity to go to the same schools. But unfortunately, that does not exist. And Shana, I do 100% agree with you. Capitalism is tied to racism.
Yes, that Shannon, and could you get a little bit deeper? I love the analogy of the capitalism tie with the racism. Could you go a little bit deeper with our audience in regards to that relationship?
So, I mean, Ruthie Wilson Gilmore, there's so many writers. Robin D. Kelly writes about racial capitalism and the prison industrial complex. And I'm sure LeRon also knows about the prison industrial complex as well. But, you know, I think Ruthie Wilson Gilmore articulates it so well, and I probably won't do it justice. But as white supremacy increases, and as neoliberalism increases, and as there's less of the welfare state, sort of that communal protective care administered by the state in terms of social services and so on and so forth, prisons become a dumping ground for folks that are unemployed or so on and so forth. It's reserve pool of labor, right? So it's a way where mostly folks that are incarcerated in the States, it's probably the same, but in prisons in Canada and jails in Canada, it's Indigenous and Black people mostly, right? So it's a way to keep people locked up in sort of a fascist way as a pool of reserve labor without having to pay, without having to care for their welfare and social services and stuff like that by keeping them incarcerated. And the folks at the lowest end of the ladder in North America are Black and Indigenous folks, right? So rather than systems, capitalist systems having to provide for or care for Black and Indigenous people, that's what prisons are for. It's to house reserve pools of labor that are being unused.
100%.
Yeah, and I think I'm horrible at explaining this stuff. So I would highly recommend Ruthie Wilson Gilmore, Robin D. Kelly, folks that write about Black Marxism. I mean, I probably just screwed it up so bad, but that's just a general understanding that I have. But also, if you look in a global context, right? In a global context, all of the work is being exported to quote unquote the global south or quote unquote third world countries for cheapest labor. Those are places where those are countries where racialized people are, majority racialized people are, right? So profit is tied to labor of people who are not white and countries where people who are not white. So increasing profit is directly linked to race. Even on a micro scale, when you walk into a Walmart, who's working there, right? It's new immigrants, it's mostly racialized folks. They're barely getting by, they're getting minimum wage or below. Walmart's still not unionized from what I remember. I think
No.
there's not unionized. So there's no worker protection. There's no overtime. There's no just completely precariously employed folks, majority of whom are racialized, right? So profit is directly, and capitalism is directly tied to race in those three ways that I can think of off the top of my head.
Wow. LeRon, you want to add to that?
No, like I think she I think she hit the nail right on the head. I mean, when we think about the prison industrial complex, it is just these human warehouses, and these human warehouses. So the state, gosh, I think the last time I checked, in the state of California, an inmate is worth about $70,000 a year. Thinking about that, $70,000 a year. There are some people I know that don't make that a year. So these guys are basically walking capital. No pun intended. So they're put in these human warehouses because there are laws created that are designed to just imprison many many people who are quote unquote on the margins. And when you're on the margins, what that means to those who don't know is that you're barely, if not underemployed or unemployed, you're living in high crime areas. You possibly could be a victim of addiction, victim of abuse, and or maybe you are engaged in unfortunate criminal activities. So laws are designed to catch you and to imprison you. And once you're in prison, you're then put to work, and you're paid something like 30 cents an hour, something ridiculous like that. And the danger of mass incarceration, Dr. Bob and Shana, is that once you're released, and I can speak for California because I've talked to many different people who have been ensnared in that system, is that once you're released, you're given about $200 gate money, a bus or a train ticket, and away, bye-bye. You probably have not gained any skills because Bill Clinton, he I believe with the 1994 crime bill that slashed a lot of the education opportunities inside. So rehabilitation doesn't really exist. Edward Bunker wrote a book called Animal Factory. And that's what these human warehouses are. So they're going to create a person who was going in there for, say, a simple misdemeanor, maybe a lower level felony, and they're going to make them into be a monster, only to reoffend. That's called recidivism. So once you reoffend, you're back into the system. You're back locked up. That's another 70,000. So this is how, I mean, for me, Shane and Dr. Bob, mass incarceration is the grossest way of how capitalism and racism work hand in hand. And you're creating products such as toothpaste, license plates, and you are in an environment that you're dehumanized. And so when you get out, you're dehumanized. So it's, once you get into the system, it's hard to get out. And so that's how that works.
Okay. What we're beginning to run out of time here, so I want to at least get one or two more conversation points. What impact has 2020 had on white supremacy?
Sure. 2020 in particular?
Yes, because it's been a very unique year.
Oh.
Yes. Oh, yes. How has it? Has it amplified it?
Yeah.
Has it kept the same? I don't think it's reduced it.
Right.
So what impact has this year? Because we're coming to the end of the year now, and most people want to get rid of this year, from who I talked to. But what has the impact on 2020 been on white supremacy? Whether it's the American election, whether it's the COVID, the pandemic, what has it done to impact, or what sort of impacts has it had on white supremacy?
I mean, I can speak for, the pandemic has the most there's tons of data out there, right, about how the pandemic has had the most devastating effect on Black and Indigenous communities. Think about, again, connecting race and capitalism. Think about where folks are housed in the most overcrowded, precarious ways because of poverty. Piggybacking off of what LeRon and I were just talking about, those are Black and Indigenous folks, right? And so, especially in the city of Toronto, the numbers are astounding that Black and Indigenous communities in particular the pandemic numbers are skyrocketing. They're huge because of this intersection of race and capitalism, right? which leads to decline in standards of living. We don't have across the board standards of living. There's no pyramid of basic needs. Like, those basic needs are not being met for our most dire communities, and they are racialized, Black, particularly Black and Indigenous communities. So I think white supremacy combined with capitalism is doing its worst in the pandemic. I read a piece by Ronaldo Walcott recently, a professor at the University of Toronto. He wrote a piece about how data is also co-opted. Gosh, I worked in politics, and it still makes me sick. It's like it's co-opted, where producing the data becomes the solution, not actually doing anything with the data, but producing the data becomes the solution, right? But I think the data around the pandemic is confirming things that we've known for a really long time. But
I just want to jump on that because I don't get involved in conversation. But one of the things that bothers me is more studies on things that are obvious.
Right?
You know, I'm gonna say I am tired. I am tired of the studies. You don't need the study. I will take you to where it is. We don't need to spend, this is my opinion alone, don't need to spend hundreds and thousands and millions of dollars of studies. We are dealing with people's lives are on the line daily. By the time the studies are complete, a lot of those people will be gone.
Right.
And Dr. Vibe, I just want to say one thing about that. That's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the sneaky project of white supremacy and how we expose it. Because do you know how many Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities get roped into collecting data or fighting for people to collect data? Like, there are so many people that go to the City of Toronto and say, we need the data. When what you said is true. We've been doing data. We've been doing studies, right? And so we get caught up in another study, another study, another set of data, another set of data. And this is not a slight against people who demand these kinds of things, because we want the proof. But, you know, when the city did their draft action plan to confront anti-Black racism, a bunch of Black activists and the city and people in the city got together and said, we don't need another study to be done. Here's the last 42 years of studies that the City of Toronto has done around anti-Black racism. Nothing has been done in terms of the recommendations. Let's start working on these. I feel like that is a strategy to combat white supremacy that we have if we looked at how we perpetuate it.
Ooh, man, Shana, I love that. It kind of reminds me of you know, there's a Senate bill, I believe it's called HR 40 in the States, which is a bill that's designed to study reparations, and it's like, look, we don't need to study it. We know that it is needed, but these talks, this data gathering, it's just more ways to just delay action. You know what I mean? You're like, you know, it's not designed to do anything, because I mean, it's just like what Dr. Bob said. Listen, we don't need any more data. I can take you to personally where and show you the effects of it firsthand. Dr. Bob, regarding your question, how has white supremacy and 2020 how, you know, the effects? I mean, you know, we could talk about, you know, Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, you know, and those and you know, those lynchings, but I think that, you know, succinctly, COVID-19, it goes to show you how racism works. For example, you know, Shana aptly put that the people who are affected the most are Black and Indigenous folks. That's facts. Not only from a health standpoint, but my friend Melissa, she said that over 40% of Black-owned businesses are not coming back because of COVID-19, right? That's one thing. Also, if you look at the way Black and white people, you know, and I'm just using that that binary, how we've sort of interacted and sort of taken in the news of the COVID-19 crisis. Black people, from the most part, you know, we've been wearing masks, we've been social distancing. White people, on the other hand, a good chunk of them have been resisting wearing the mask. And I have a theory behind that. Look, white folks have never been told that they cannot do anything in this country, right? So when you have, you know, several mandates that are saying, please wear a mask, please wear a mask, they're like, hold up, I'm actually being denied something. I'm actually being told that I have to do something for the first time. This is why you see so many anti-maskers, because they've never been designated with laws, suggestions, mandates that tell them that they have to do something. It's like the old saying goes, any sense of equality or you know, any leveling the playing field to the privilege seems like oppression. So this is why you have so many of them that are saying, well, that are saying, well, you know what, it's a common cold. They are totally denying science. And to be honest with you, Dr. Bob and Shana, they are primarily where we are. The third thing, you have a president who was just absolutely incompetent, and that's just putting it, you know, plainly. His handling of the coronavirus pandemic is just wow. I mean, we can't put it like we can't say mishandled, right? Because that wouldn't be doing it. That would be doing a service to how bad he was. But so the reason why that I bring that up is that, look, wasn't a Biden fan, not a Harris fan. However, if we're going to put our horses behind a guy that has let over 260,000 people die versus a person who has a plan for that, the fact that many white people chose to throw their lot behind the guy, that highlights the difference in how we see things, and that highlighted how white supremacy still thrives in 2020.
Good points. Good points. Yeah, I don't get involved in the conversations a lot. I let the guests drive the ship, but as I said, I'm tired of the studies. Yeah. And again, I agree with Shana that I no offense to people who do research. Hey, respect you, but the people that the research is being done on, they're on a thread.
Right.
So
we're tired of that, right?
You know, and I'll just add one other thing. In the US, will you ever pass a bill to help people?
No.
And
no.
And now in Canada, we had this like $221 million put aside for businesses, Black businesses. First of all, most of the Black businesses won't qualify. A third of that money is going to the banks. So that's why I asked both your opinions on white supremacy in 2020, because it's become amplified, and the people who are suffering the most look like us.
Absolutely, 100%.
I mean, just to follow up on what you're saying, Dr. Vibe, like what LeRon was just saying about, you know, more people voting for somebody who's like, there's almost 300,000 people now in the States that have died from the pandemic. Doesn't that exemplify that the collective is disappeared? This is what I'm saying.
Exactly.
Like white supremacy, the opposite of white supremacy is collective care, community. If there's 300,000 people in the States and people are still voting for Donald Trump, not just white people, that is exactly a reflection of white supremacy and how it tears down collective and builds up this neoliberal, rugged individual that can pull up their bootstraps and succeed and be rich and whatever the case, be Candace Owens and survive. Right?
There's one commentator, I will not give his name, but he says the greatest supporter of white supremacy are blacks and people of color.
Yeah, no, like, come on, come on, now, that's what we call in the States trolls. Like, come on, Dr. Bob, like that just sounds stupid. Like
I'm just putting his opinion out there. I'm not going to give his name.
Well, I mean, like,
and you may know who I'm talking about, but I'm not going to give his name. A fairly prominent person on social media. But I'm just saying out there because this person says that we look up to them, we want to get acknowledgement by them, etc., and we're reinforcing their values.
But that's looking up to white people. White supremacy, something different. White supremacy is a system. White people are people.
It's a system. This person needs to read. Like, look, all I have to say is this. Elijah Muhammad once said that if you give people dirty water, they will drink it. But if you give people clean water, they will drink it. So when this person says, "Oh, we're looking up," oh well, we are the biggest proponents of white supremacy. Look, that it's just idiocy. When you talk about race and black folks, you have to talk about white supremacy because you're not going to come up with the right answers if you only focus on one. Like that's called punching down, Dr. Bob, and I have another word for it. It's called cowardice. So that's all that I'm gonna say about that.
Well, we'll leave it at that. I'd like to say thanks for both you taking time out of your positive, productive schedules. Definitely have to have you back because we just scratched the surface on this one. Any final comments before we let both of you go?
I just want to say that I really enjoyed this conversation. Shana, you were incredible. I'm really happy to do this on the great Dr. Bob's platform. It's a Toronto thing tonight, huh? So
no, it's an international thing. It's not a Toronto thing.
Got it. All right. Well, yeah, no, great show, you guys. Seriously, had a good time.
Any final words? I'm just gonna, for people who are watching this live on the replay, I'll certainly put your contact information available. But any final words you have for our audience? And thank you, fantastic thought process, and thank you for sharing with us.
I want to say to everyone who studies racial capitalism and the prison industrial complex, I'm sorry if I butchered your incredible theories, but that's just my basic understanding. But yeah, I just think if we think about white supremacy as a system and not white people, and we are introspective about our complicity in it and how we participate in it, I feel like that's a part of the process that we need to engage more in. And not just think about it, right? There needs to be action behind it as well, whatever that might look like. But what it should look like is building community and building the collective. And we're doing a horrible job at that right now. So,
well, when's the book coming out?
It'll come out in September, hopefully, depending on how horrible the reviews are. But
stop it.
Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, it'll come out maybe September, October of next year.
Looking forward to it. Thank you so much. LeRon, any final words and how can people get in touch with you?
Yes, my name is LeRon Barton. You can find me at www.leronbarton.com. I'm on Twitter at mainline LeRon. I'm on Instagram at LeRon L. Barton, and I have a professional writing page on Facebook, LeRon L. Barton. I'm always looking for great conversation and great exchange.
So I'm going to just finish up here. I'd like to thank everyone who watched this conversation live on the replay. My name is Dr. Vibe. If you want to get in touch with me, best place is at my website, VIBESHOW.com. It's the home of Epic Conversations. I'm the host of Epic Conversations. And if you're watching this live on replay, I'm just putting up the other places where you can find me. YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. There's my email address. And if you are able, if you're watching this, there's a link on there. You can do a little post-conversation survey. Give us your thoughts on what you thought about this conversation tonight. As always, I'd like to close off with this 2020-2018 Canadian Ethnic Media Association Award winner, also host of Monthly Conversations for Dads and Fathers. I'd like to thank everyone who watched this live on the replay or listened to it on replay. I close out with this. Live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Sometimes you have to get small to get, sometimes you have to get smaller to get bigger. Block assumptions, then aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider. And especially these days, remember to give yourself grace. God bless. Peace be well. Keep the faith. And thank you for watching. And take care.